Today on Plain English, we're talking about fentanyl, the substance that's stalking the illegal drug market. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English lesson number 551. JR is the producer, and he has uploaded all of today's great content to plainenglish.com/551. That is where you can find this audio lesson at a faster speed. You can find the transcript, an in-depth video lesson, practice exercises, quizzes, and more. plainenglish.com/551. Coming up today, fentanyl is an opioid drug. It can be taken on its own, but it's most common for it to be mixed into other drugs like heroin or cocaine. And it's behind an alarming increase in drug overdose deaths in the U.S. In the second half of the lesson, I'll show you how to use the phrasal verb mix in, and it's different, slightly different than the word mix. So if you don't know the difference between mix and mix in, then stay listening in the second half of the lesson. Ready? Let's get started. It's more than car crashes, more than suicides, more even than influenza in a typical year. In 2021, over 100,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, an all-time record. 2/3 died from opioids, most of them from just one substance, fentanyl. Fentanyl is a very potent painkiller. In a hospital, physicians can prescribe fentanyl when patients need immediate, powerful pain relief. This might be for cancer patients or for patients recovering from surgery. In its legal form, fentanyl can be administered as a shot, as a patch that goes on your skin, or as a lozenge, like a cough drop. Illegal fentanyl is different. In the illegal market, fentanyl is a powder that's mixed into other drugs. Fentanyl became popular for two reasons. It's extremely potent and it's cheap to make. For example, it's estimated to be about 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. It's also cheaper to make than heroin since its ingredients are commonly available chemicals. By mixing a little cheap fentanyl into expensive heroin, a supplier could lower costs. And because the effects of heroin and fentanyl are similar, the end consumers often didn't know that they were taking heroin laced with fentanyl. Users say fentanyl causes feelings of euphoria, relaxation, and drowsiness. The problem, though, is that while fentanyl feels similar, its effects are not exactly the same. For one thing, the highs it provides don't last as long. So users of fentanyl will seek out more of the drug more often, like every few hours, making it harder to hold down a job. For another, it's much more powerful and more addictive. If a heroin user gets hooked on a supply with a high concentration of fentanyl, it can be hard or impossible to go back to normal heroin. Withdrawal from fentanyl is similar to withdrawal from heroin. Patients experience anxiety, vomiting, chills, pain, and sweating for days. Many fentanyl users have stopped feeling the positive effects of the drug. Now they only take it to avoid the withdrawal. The strategy of mixing fentanyl into heroin was such a success for drug suppliers that they started doing this with other drugs. Fentanyl was later added to cocaine, methamphetamine, and even counterfeit versions of prescription drugs. People buying fake Adderall, fake Xanax, and fake Percocet off the internet and from unregulated sources have unknowingly been taking fentanyl. And this is not just here or there. In 2017, 10% of the fake prescription drugs seized by American drug authorities were laced with a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. 10% in 2017. In 2022, listen to this. In 2022, 60% of seized counterfeit pills contained fentanyl. In New York City, in 2020, there were 980 cocaine overdose deaths. 81% involved fentanyl. This substance is everywhere. But mixing fentanyl into other drugs is a dangerous game. Only a few grains of fentanyl can be the difference between a normal dose and a lethal dose. The drug naloxone is an effective antidote which can be used in the case of an overdose. Testing is also an option. Users can test their drugs for fentanyl before taking them. Casual drug users, people who might use cocaine or methamphetamine occasionally on a night out, they are starting to take notice. It's now common for partygoers to test their drugs with new fentanyl detection strips before going out for the night. This is so scary. I mean, people know, or they think they know, the risks of cocaine. They know the risks of taking counterfeit Adderall. But then they take counterfeit Adderall, and it turns out it's actually laced with fentanyl, and now they're addicted to a drug 50 times worse than heroin. Sheesh. I was reading this article about testing strips, and testing strips are illegal in the US. There is some logic to this, but not helpful logic. Cocaine is an illegal drug. So anything used to test the purity of cocaine is classified as illegal drug paraphernalia. That means it's something used in association with illegal drugs. Testing strips can save lives if they're used to detect fentanyl mixed into cocaine. But the testing strips are illegal, so it's hard for people to get them. And 4 out of 5 cocaine overdose deaths in New York were due to fentanyl, which it's illegal to test for. Today's expression is a phrasal verb to mix in. This is a close cousin to the word mix. So I'm going to show you the difference between mix and mix in. Now you probably know the word mix, but let me give you a primer. If you're making a cocktail, JR, pay attention. If you're making a cocktail, you might mix 3 ingredients. Many cocktails follow this formula: 2 parts spirit, 1 part sweet, 1 part sour. So the bartender will mix 3 ingredients together, the alcohol and the other ingredients. This means you combine the ingredients into one. Now, individually, the ingredients were not a cocktail, but if you combine them, they are a cocktail. You mix them together to create something new. If you're more into baking, you might mix eggs, flour, and sugar together. When you mix them together, you create batter. You didn't have batter before, but when you combine the ingredients, when you mix them together, you have something new. You have cake batter, okay? I know we have a lot of engineers who listen. You can mix concrete. I would never try this, but according to what I've read, you make concrete by mixing water, sand, gravel, and cement together. So that's mix. What's the difference then with mix in? It's a very small difference, but it is important. When you mix in, you add something small to something that already exists in its final form. And the thing you add doesn't change the essential nature of what you're adding it to. So think of it this way. You add something small to something that already exists, something that could be a final product. Here's an example. You've mixed some ingredients together to create cookie dough. Then you mix in some chocolate chips. You add chocolate chips to the cookie dough. Now, when you mix in the chocolate, you're not changing the essential nature of the cookie dough. It's still cookie dough. You're adding something else without changing its basic characteristics. So the difference is this. Mix in adds a small ingredient to something that's almost done. Mix is to combine things to create something new. You mix eggs, flour, and sugar to create something new, batter, but you mix in some chocolate chips. So this is how you heard it on today's lesson about fentanyl, only the final result is not delicious, but deadly. Fentanyl is mixed in with heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine. So remember, mix in is about adding an ingredient to something else, something that could be a final product. Heroin by itself is a final product, but drug makers mix fentanyl into heroin. They combine a little fentanyl to the heroin that already exists to create a new and often lethal combination. Here's another example from the news. You may have heard that Europe and America have combined to put a cap on the price of oil exported from Russia. The cap is $60 per barrel. That means that Europe and America and the companies based there will only buy oil at $60 per barrel or less if that oil came from Russia. The market rate is about $80 per barrel for oil that came from elsewhere. But if the oil comes from Russia, buyers are only allowed to pay $60. Great. So what's happening? Russia is exporting oil to neutral locations like Singapore and the United Arab Emirates. Russian oil is being mixed in with oil from other locations, and then that is sold back to America and Europe at the full price. So voila, Russia is avoiding the price cap sanctions. They mix their oil into the oil from other places, and it disappears into the global market. It's Thursday, so JR has selected a song of the week. Today's song is called In This Shirt by the Irrepressibles. Irrepressible. What a word for a band. Here's what that means. If something is irrepressible, you can't control it. Irrepressible laughter. We sometimes say that means you're laughing and you just can't control it. A person is irrepressible if the person expresses a lot of emotion. They can't control or hide their emotions. Anyway, the song this week is In This Shirt by the Irrepressibles. And that's all for today's Plain English. Congratulations on all the great progress you're making in English. Some of you study every lesson carefully. You read the transcripts, you do the exercises, you write examples, you join our calls. Others listen in the car whenever you have a chance. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter. I'm really happy you're including Plain English in your routine. We'll be back on Monday with a new lesson. See you then.